Hello, everybody. How are you guys doing today? My name is Carlos X360, and today we're going to do a video about um the current generation consoles and the PS4. All right. So I love the PS4. It's a great console. I have a lot of games for it. But the thing is, we are about 4 years into the release of PlayStation 5, and PlayStation 4 will not die. So we're going to talk about two subjects here. Okay? The first one is about PlayStation 4, which is not dying anytime soon because the developers are looking at the sales numbers with correlation to the 114 million copies of PlayStation 4 consoles sold all around the world. Okay, so I understand that to develop a game, you need a console with like a huge installed base. I understand that. I get that. I totally get that. But the thing is, the PlayStation 4 is holding back a lot of the current generation games. Okay? So let's start with Dreamcast guy over here, and we'll go through the videos together. All right? Because I have 3 videos to talk about. Okay, so bear with me. Let's go.
What's up, gamers? Dreamcast Guy here, and today we're talking about the death of the PlayStation 4, or I guess I should say the fact that so many
This has been
gamers
released
are begging to
a little
let
while
the
ago,
PlayStation 4
but I'm just gonna
finally
let him
just
talk a little
die
bit.
so that the
I'll
PS5
get to it.
and PC and next Nintendo Switch and stuff can finally start to thrive. But let's discuss. Hi, hope you're having a great day, and if you could please give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Yesterday, I got hit by a car while riding my bike, so I'm pretty bruised up, I'm pretty bloody,
Sorry,
and stuff
buddy.
like that. And I'll talk about that at the end of the video for somebody who wants some entertainment, because it's an embarrassing story because it's pretty much 85% my fault. But let's start with the video games. So, yeah, this was announced a couple days ago, and I wrote surprised by the amount of anger that this announcement actually unleashed onto the web, which is the fact that Star Wars Survivors is coming to Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 in September. Now, when I heard this, I was not particularly shocked because, honestly, they did tell us they were testing.
Jedi Survivor has already been released for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series consoles. So for them to release it to previous gen consoles makes no sense to anybody who reads that. Because here's the thing. Usually they are concurrent console releases. This is a situation where they release it on the current console and then the previous gen consoles, if that makes sense. Not the previous gen and then the, I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me. That's what he's saying here. I guess I don't know. But yeah, I agree with that sentiment. That shouldn't happen. But the thing is, the developers behind Jedi and Survivor is looking at, hey, there's PlayStation 4 and there's Xbox One. Um, yeah, I don't know. There's a big install size in there. That's what their idea is. So go after that market. But here's the thing. It's already too late, and there's a lot of people who are I don't know if I'm making sense. But the first 6 months of a game release is it when you play through like the game, it so the first run is what sells the game. So if that's done, that's done. So why is it being left into the PlayStation 4, Xbox One generation to die? Make no sense. I don't know. Makes no sense. Okay.
This out. They were kind of experimenting with the idea of porting it to last gen, but when they announced this, the amount of people that were saying, this is a bad idea, we need to move on from 11-year-old consoles. The fact that the PS4 is still getting games in 2024, this is bizarre because I do think the success of the PlayStation 5 is very measurable. I mean, this was announced just about an hour ago. The PS5 has sold 62 million units in its first 4 years. So it's not like it's unsuccessful, it's definitely a big hit. But when you scroll down to the comments, people are discussing the fact that despite the fact that so many people are buying the PlayStation 5, it doesn't seem like the raw sales, the raw attention, the raw dollars earned is actually matching what the PlayStation 4 did. I mean, this guy here, this is definitely just a troll. I mean, his name is Gaming Grifter, and it says, I'm a big fan of the Xbox. Okay, so he's trolling a bit, but he does say here, Stellar Blade and Rise of Ronin didn't even sell a combined 10 million copies. Like, that guy's being a hater, but I must admit, I find it fascinating that so many games are...
And that doesn't even okay. So when we're talking about 60 million copies, when we're talking about 60 million consoles sold, that's a huge number. But why is it selling only 10 million copies of a game? And that's what we're at over here. Okay? So we'll keep going.
Are still getting this cross-generation release. Like, the PS5 is still way on top, it's still way ahead of the competition, but without Sony properly supporting it. Like, we are getting so few drip-fed first-party games. We're about to get Astrobot, and I'm excited about that, but, I mean, the slate of release dates when it comes to stuff made by Sony for Sony is continuing to dry up. And a lot of these third-party publishers, a lot of people like Rockstar, and Square Enix, and everybody else, they're just going, okay, we can release stuff on PS5, but we could also just release it on PS4 as well if they can afford it and go, okay, that's 120 million possible extra sales that we have access to.
See, like I said before,
pointing out this. Call of Duty Black Ops, I think, is a very interesting example because that's the next big Call of Duty. It's
1 second about that, by the way.
Microsoft is
just give me a.
real hard. It's
Let's
Game Pass
keep
and stuff
going.
like that. And a lot of people are saying it's bizarre that they're even putting that out on last gen. I think Sony is satisfied. The PS5 is currently trailing the PS4 by 1.6 million units, but the PS5 is more expensive, it had more supply constraints and price hikes instead of cuts. At the same time, the PS4 had that PS4 Pro bump. We'll see what happens with the PS5 Pro later.
We'll talk about this later. Don't worry about that.
Because I do think that this is a strange circumstance because I think it's pretty obvious that Sony is in a good spot. The PlayStation, just as a brand, is way, way, way out in the lead. But a lot of these companies that are just making stuff, I feel like there is this obsession with safeness of going, okay, how can we make the game for the biggest pool of people? Recently, Vince Vaughn was on The Hot Ones and he was talking about Hollywood and stuff like that. And he said that everybody is afraid to try something new. Instead, they just go, okay, let's make a Barbie movie. Or people know what Battleship is. So we got a Battleship movie. I think this is a good example of how the video game industry is also kind of thinking right now. I saw this. This was completely mind blowing to me. These are the top selling games on PlayStation platforms as of a couple months ago. And you could see a lot of these are also on the PlayStation 4. These are the biggest games in the world right now in 2024 on PlayStation systems. Elden Ring is also coming to freaking PlayStation 4. A lot of these games, Call of Duty, that's on PlayStation 4, MLB The Show, that's on PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Minecraft, EA Sports, Shin Megami Tensei. Think about that. Almost all of these games are also on the PlayStation 4. Now, I'm not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing. I'm saying that I think that we're almost seeing a repeat of history. These are all games that came out in the last couple of years that were also released on last gen, and I think we're going to see a bit of the Atari effect. Now, anybody who's ever studied
I disagree.
history,
No. I disagree with that because PlayStation is doing pretty well, but the problem is, a lot of people like the PlayStation 4 and want to stay on the PlayStation 4, and they don't think that the PlayStation 5 has any like meaningful leaps. I'll talk about this in a separate video, but I'll just explain it like this, okay? We're not in the generation or the we're not in the era where generation to generation is a huge leap. No, it's not like Nintendo 64 to PlayStation 2. No. That is gone. So the idea of going from PlayStation 4 to PlayStation 5 is going to have a leap. That's not going to happen. And I'll tell you why. Because what we saw with Xbox One or even Xbox 360 to Xbox One, we saw like minimal changes here and there. There was no big leap from Xbox 360 to Xbox One. We didn't see that. When we got from Xbox One to Xbox One X or S or whatever, the Microsoft naming convention, it blows my mind, bro. Oh my god, it's so confusing. Next generation Xbox needs to be more simple. Microsoft! Oh my god. Okay, so anyway, back to what I was trying to say. So, from Xbox 360 to Xbox One to Xbox One X, it was small changes. It was like technological leaps in small doses, if that makes any sense. I think I said that perfectly. And then when it went from Xbox One to Xbox Series consoles, that jump was a little bit smaller. So we're not gonna see the era of technological leaps anymore. That is gone. We're at the point where the graphical leaps, it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and everybody's gonna be pretty much doing almost the same thing with ideas that are stolen from one the other or whatever, kind of like inspired by this game, inspired by that game, inspired by this game. But the thing is, and here's the thing, a lot of these people are making those improvements based on the inspiration of somebody else and stealing ideas from somebody else. That. And oftentimes they are not just stealing or being inspired by that idea. They are trying to look for the biggest market. For the longest time, it was a lot of developers. They were chasing the Fortnite business model because there were a lot of people playing Fortnite. And then they got inspired by the Battle Royale thing. They got inspired by the Battle Pass thing. And then it made the industry a little bit worse as time goes on because nobody is innovating. That's part of what he's saying. But what I'm saying is, it's not going to be like the Atari situation where it went from one console to the other and the rest of the market was left behind. Atari in the past, it was a bunch of stupid games that did not have any improvements in the next console. That's what I saw when I was growing up. In my first 3 years of being alive on this planet, and I was bored with Atari. Yeah, this is not the same situation, Max. No, no. Different, totally different. No, I disagree on that one. I disagree. Disagree.
They kind of screwed themselves
I
because their
disagree.
first console, the Atari 2600, was a massive blowout success. I mean, it was just such a huge way to play color games on a TV. I mean, it wasn't the best thing ever. It was definitely very low tech. It was way before even the original Nintendo that was released in America. But that first one, the 2600, was so popular that when they tried to release subsequent systems, some sequel consoles like the 5200 and the 7400, they bombed. So because of it, when developers were trying to make stuff, they kept making games
The way I see it at that time, um, they were more like variations consoles. They were not like making improvements, kind of like what we have today. But the problem is the difference between PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 is that there is a little bit of sauce. I'll explain it in a hardware review. I'm gonna explain it there. But listen, going from PlayStation 4 to PlayStation 5 is all about um, improving in, improving a few areas. Okay, the first one is the hard drive. Okay, so when you have the hard drive, it slows down the loading times of the games. The other part is the texture streaming that is on PlayStation 4 to PlayStation 5. Um, this is not gonna make sense unless you look at it from the PlayStation 5 console. Okay, so when you load a game in PlayStation 5, it's loading using the SSD. So the SSD is like rapid firing the loading of assets here and there. And when you play the game, you're actually streaming the game in the background. A developer will be able to explain what that means. So let's say in Grand Theft Auto from, let's say, 3 to 5. All the assets in the background will be like pushed into your view as you roam around in the world. That's called like texture streaming. And it's done in the background. Nobody knows it's going on in the background. But texture streaming in today's time is going to be different now. Okay? And I'll explain in a little bit. Let's keep watching the video. Sorry for the interruption, but yeah, that's my explanation for now.
Exclusively for the 2600 instead of the later consoles, because that was a bigger pool with a bigger install base that was already spending money. I almost think that this anger about the state of the PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation 4, I think this is strange to me, because I think we're coming up on the last console generation. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm being a boomer and I can't imagine how things are going to change, but for the last 20 years, everything has just been about better graphics, less load times, and slightly tweaked controllers, right? I mean, true, you can get some really funky controllers and stuff like that. There's a weirdo, super customized PlayStation 4 controller with back buttons and stuff like that. But my point is the fact that there hasn't been an innovation that truly feels like that next console generation is absolutely relevant when it comes to PlayStation.
The major leaps.
Obsess over graphics and stuff like that. I feel like PlayStation is hitting the spot where once we hit complete photorealistic graphics, what comes next? What is absolutely necessary?
That's a good question.
Next generation, if they just keep making more beautiful games instead of stuff that feels that innovative or different. I'm saying this in a weird way, but what I'm essentially saying is, what happens when graphics get good enough? There are people that are still playing stuff on their PlayStation 4. They don't feel underpowered. They don't feel like they're getting ripped off. They don't feel like they're losing out. It does feel like the PlayStation 4 is still
Actually, I disagree with that.
What happens in 10 years is the PS5.
Actually, I disagree with that. But a lot of the 114 million PlayStation 4 owners, they feel that way. And you guys need to get off PS4 as soon as possible. Because the next thing we're going to talk about is texture streaming. I'll explain this in a minute. Okay? You guys got to get off PS4. I'm telling you. We're now in 4 years of cross-gen games holding a lot of the next-gen games backwards. I'll explain in a minute. But what he's saying is true and not true. When I was playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 beta, I saw the texture streaming for the first time. And it was obvious at that time. The second time I saw that, it was Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. I'm going to show you an example here very soon. Just stick with me here. Stick with me. Just stick with me.
Still going to be out is the PlayStation 6 coming out. I almost think we're going to hit a time where there is a final PlayStation, where the graphics, the playability, the controller are just so fine.
I disagree with that too.
Forever and keep making it cheaper. Maybe I'm completely freaking out, but I just feel like this generation has, in a way, been incredibly fun for me. I've enjoyed the PlayStation games I've been playing, like Helldivers and Spider-Man and God of War, but I do feel like we're hitting this strange spot where people are feeling less excited for the next generation.
Oh, that's true.
I'm not sure I've ever
that's true.
experienced that.
That's true.
There's little reason to go next gen outside of buying a replacement system for the PlayStation 4 games to be played on. I honestly may sit this gen out, as the only thing I want to check out is GTA 6. Let them cook. This is, honestly, this comment, when I read it, this is the entire inspiration for the video. It kind of blew my mind. The idea of sitting out a console generation, as a hardcore
Don't
gamer,
do
I wonder
that.
how many people are thinking like this. People that are saying,
GTA
okay,
6
the
is
fact
gonna
that we're still
have
getting PS4 games,
technical
is it time to let the old
logical
gen die? A lot
leaps
of people
too.
are saying yes. This
It's
you
gonna
can see my
have
poll
that
here is 1,000
aha
votes. I
moment
saw
too.
Pio did a similar thing. It's time for games to stop coming to the PlayStation 4. It's been long enough. 4 years into the generation. Yeah, here we go. 4 years into the gen. Should games only be coming to the PS5 and Xbox Series X? Yes, stop cross-gen. I don't think it will stop.
I say
like
yes.
Even this year's COD, so many games now only come with the PlayStation 4 version because the PS5 is backwards compatible. You can put something on PS4 and also sell it on PS5.
That's also
I
true.
just feel like
I'll explain this in a different
PlayStation
video
is in a
very
strange
soon.
spot, but I feel like it just reflects the game industry. People are afraid of flops. People are afraid of putting something out and not selling a couple million copies at the very least. And if your options are a console that sold 62 million units or a console that sold 120 million units, of course a lot of people are going to, if possible, put it on the PlayStation 4 and then sell it additionally on the PS5 because there is that backwards compatibility. I am just wondering what happens with the next generation. What happens if they announce a PlayStation 6 in 3 or 4 years? You know, I think
we're gonna
there
have the
is
same
a very
issue
strong
that we
chance
do
that we're
now
coming
because
up
people
on the end of
don't,
consoles
people are
as
not,
we know it, like console generations. I feel like we're just reaching a point.
people are not paying attention to the small stuff. And this is why I did the Final Fantasy VII Remake video review. People are not looking at the small stuff anymore. And it saddens me. It saddens me. Because I played Final Fantasy VII Remake on PlayStation 4. It was okay, but I saw the frame rate. It was kind of rough. It was doing fine, but then it has this little dip, like up and down sometimes. But it's not. It doesn't show very well, but you can see it when you see it. And in the PlayStation 5 version, they optimized it to run at 60 frames per second locked. Like, no stuttering, no frame drops, no slowdown, none of that. The game plays pretty well on PS4, don't get me wrong, but what I'm saying is there are like some parts that go like this. Okay? Alright, so yeah, I people are not paying attention to the small stuff. The backward compatibility program in PlayStation 5 is not something that we've had in. To me, the PlayStation 5 backwards compatibility is like the innovation of that console. Nobody's gonna believe me when I say that. But you got to look at how the cross-gen is handled right now. Okay? They're giving you options. Do you want two different kinds of downloads, which is PlayStation 4 version and the PlayStation 5 version? That's the cross-gen thing that we have right now. But there are other ways too. Some games have like multiple different versions. I'll keep this simple for you guys, but just bear with me for a second. Final Fantasy VII Remake has Final Fantasy VII Remake for PS4, and then there's a PlayStation 5 upgrade path, which uses the disc from the PS4 version. So this eliminates the data disk from this thing over here. Okay, so the PS5 version has all the files, but it's being played from the PS4 version. Yes, that sounds like a that sounds like the idea of the Xbox console, the Xbox Series console, where you put in the disc and it plays off that disc. That's the backwards compatibility system in PS5, and none of y'all are paying attention to that.
Of complete photorealism, where everything is good enough, the tools to make games are cheap enough, Unreal Engine is so ubiquitous, Unity, like there is so many ways for passionate people to make passionate games, and there's enough power in these consoles already. I think things may change at some point. We'll see how well the success of the PlayStation 5 Pro goes. I think that is going to be the litmus test. I think that if the PS5 Pro actually finds an audience, if it even sells 10 million consoles, I think the PlayStation
I'm
6
buying
will
one.
come here
Yeah.
in the next 3 or 4 years. But if the PlayStation 5 Pro bombs, I have a feeling we're going to get another 10-year console generation with the PlayStation 5. But
It won't bomb.
wrong. I'm just saying that I'm in
It
a
won't
spot
bomb.
where the
Because
continued
there's
support
some
of the
people who
PlayStation 4
understand
to me
that there
does feel
are
like
a little bit of
mistake. It
problems
does feel
in the
like our
PS5.
obsession with
There are
previous
some
generations, with
problems,
having
yeah.
it installed
I'm
issues
not
and
gonna
stuff,
lie
is
about that.
going
I'm
to
not
end
gonna
up hurting the
mince words
experiences
about that.
when
No,
we're trying to aim
no.
for the lowest specs, the lowest
I'll
quality
explain it in the
visuals
next video.
for every single experience instead of aiming for the top. But what do you guys think about this? Does this seem like an issue, or are you fine with whatever as long as the games are good? Which is
You
a fair
shouldn't
point.
just be
Tell me your
fine
thoughts
with
in the
it.
comments down
No.
below, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and please keep dreaming. Okay.
X. So, now, on the subject of texture streaming, Activision just released a patch update that forces Modern Warfare 3 players to have two different kinds of texture streaming. I'll let Exclusive Ace explain it. See you later.
What's up, guys? My name is Ace, and one of the controversial things that changed with the Season 5 Reloaded update for Modern Warfare 3, and this is in preparation for Black Ops 6, is the new texture streaming options, and more importantly, the fact that we can no longer turn off texture streaming entirely. So in today's video, I wanted to take a deep look and compare optimized versus minimal, which are our current options, to see just how much bandwidth they're using, are these various options going to be causing lag for people, as well as a quality comparison between the two. And diving right in, what is texture streaming? For those of you guys that don't know, texture streaming is a technique that developers use to keep file sizes smaller, so the total footprint of the game will be smaller, because instead of having all of the high resolution textures downloaded on your system, you instead have lower resolution textures installed, and then when it comes to those high resolution textures, you're going to be downloading them or streaming them in real time as they're needed. So as you load a map and you start moving around that map, you're going to be starting off with those baseline textures, which are good enough, but not amazing by any means. You're not going to have crazy high fidelity. And then with texture streaming, it's going to be downloading those textures as you need them, so you will be able to experience them in their maximum quality without taking up a ton of storage space on your system. And this technology can be excellent for a lot of people out there. For people that have a good internet connection with high bandwidth and no data caps at all, and not a whole lot of storage space, this is great. It significantly reduces the file size, while still allowing them to experience the maximum texture quality without having any noticeable downsides to their connection experience. On the other hand, though, for people that don't have a very good or consistent internet connection, or maybe they have data caps and they're only allowed to use a certain amount of data a month before they get throttled or before their internet is shut down entirely for the rest of the period, this has the potential to be terrible for them. And previously, before this update, you could turn texture streaming on or off, whereas like I mentioned, after this update, now the only options are optimized or minimal. There's no off option. And as a result, there's quite a few people that are up in arms about this, I think understandably so. However, I do want to show exactly how much bandwidth each of these options is using, just so the community is at least armed with the facts. They know exactly how much bandwidth is required and how much is being used with this. And let's start off with the optimized setting. This is the one that's going to give you the best quality textures, but it does require the most bandwidth. And with this setting on, as you're moving around the map, you are going to be consistently downloading textures.
Now, pay attention to the video itself.
12 megabits per second. Which for many people these days, that's nothing. That's a tiny portion of their total bandwidth. Like for me, for instance, I have 1 gig fiber. This doesn't even put a dent in the amount of bandwidth that I have available. And as a result, this shouldn't be causing me any issues whatsoever bandwidth-wise.
See,
in saying that though, that's not everybody's situation. For many people,
I think he's
they don't have this
doing
much bandwidth.
the options to show you exactly what's going on,
and they have other
big
people in the
game
household
and
using
whatever.
bandwidth for other things. So the next thing I wanted to test here is what happens if you have severely limited bandwidth. So in this one, with my router, I limited my bandwidth to a total of just 1 megabit per second up and down. And once again, I have the optimized setting turned on for texture streaming. And what I noticed here is it wasn't using even close to my entire bandwidth, even though it was such a limited bandwidth. In fact, I wasn't even able to detect the difference between minimal and optimized when I had such a limited bandwidth. And therefore, it does appear this system is smart in the sense that if you don't have enough bandwidth for it, it will effectively just turn that setting off in the back end. And even though you have the
even
optimized
worse
setting
too.
enabled, it won't actually allow that to hog up all of your bandwidth, therefore creating lag issues in game. Now, obviously, that's a bit of an extreme example. I'd say there's probably not many of you watching this right now that have an internet connection that slow. Maybe a few of you, but you'd be in the minority by far. So what happens if you have 10 megabits per second up and down? So we're almost at that level of having enough to have that consistent texture streaming at 12 megabits per second, but not quite. What happens then? Well, once again, it appears that this system detects that you don't have enough bandwidth, and it doesn't use up all your bandwidth here in order to texture stream, even with the optimized setting turned on. So then, of course, the next thing I wanted to test is what happens if you do have a little bit over. So in this case, I set it to 20 megabits per second, and now we can see that it is constantly using that texture streaming just like when I had an uncapped bandwidth. So it's using about 10 to 12 megabits per second in order to texture stream as I'm moving around a map. So that's the first thing to note here, and I did find that quite interesting. It is a smart enough system to detect that if you don't have the bandwidth, it won't bog down your internet completely in order to use this texture streaming. It'll basically just automatically turn that off for you, or at least turn it so far down that it's not even detectable. And as a result, it appears they've at least taken steps to mitigate potential lag issues in-game caused by texture streaming, and in theory, this should prevent this from causing connection issues. Now, of course, everybody's network is different. Personally, for my connection, I almost never run into significant packet loss or packet bursts, unlike a lot of people that I know do, even though they have really good internet connections. So I will say, while I wasn't able to find any evidence whatsoever here that texture streaming is going to cause lag issues in-game, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's impossible that this would cause issues for some people out there. In either case, that's just looking at the optimized setting, so the best possible texture streaming setting. What happens with our new setting though, where instead of being able to turn texture streaming off entirely, we're only able to select the minimal setting, so it's always going to be on, but what does this look like bandwidth-wise? Well, with this one, with my uncapped 1 gig up, 1 gig down, the moment I turn minimal on, it drops the bandwidth usage down to like 0.1 megabits per second, and honestly, that's probably the required bandwidth just for running the game in general. So as far as I can tell, if you turn this setting to minimal, it essentially turns texture streaming off. And therefore, if connection quality is a concern for you with texture streaming, and you are worried that this is causing packet loss issues for you, it does appear that switching it over to minimal is effectively the same as just turning it off in the past. And based on what I'm seeing here at least, turning this over to minimal should eliminate any doubt when it comes to in-game connection issues stemming from texture streaming. So there we go, those are the two settings and how they interact with bandwidth. Now let's have a look at how this impacts the look of your game. Keeping in mind, I'm doing all of this on a PS5, so things are really consistent here. There aren't a ton of PC-related variables involved here and tons of different graphic settings or anything. It's just a PS5 running at 1440p. And I started this off loading the map up with the minimal setting turned on, so it didn't already load up this map with all the high-res textures. It's the first time I booted this map since I booted up my console. And just pay close attention to the textures as you're moving around the map, as well as some of the pop-in as well. If you look a bit into the distance, you can see various textures popping up as you're navigating the map. And now this is what it looks like once I turn that optimized setting on and I'm walking around the map. With this, I'm noticing a lot more of those little pop-ins as I'm moving around the map, and that's those high-res textures streaming and loading up as I'm moving around. Keeping in mind, once they are loaded, they'll be added to your cache, and therefore having a larger cache is generally going to be beneficial because then it will store those in the cache. So if you leave that area and then come back to it, it will still be stored and you won't be seeing that pop in happen all the time. Whereas if you keep it on small, I noticed you'll have the same textures popping up again if you go to the opposite end of the map and then you come back again. But honestly, in general, at least for multiplayer, if I'm just playing the game and I'm just trying to kill enemy players, I'm not really focusing on these little details in the textures. Technically speaking, yeah, they do look a little bit better. If you're honing in on the individual textures with the optimized setting, it is going to look a little bit better, although you may also notice a bit more of that pop-in taking place. And just for a better look at this difference, without moving around the map like crazy, if we stand still and stand in one spot, especially focusing on the texture on the right-hand side, that wooden pillar that's on the right, with the minimal setting turned on, you can see it's quite blurry, whereas when you turn optimized on, you can definitely see there's a lot more resolution to that. It looks noticeably better, but again, you're only really going to notice that if you're standing still and staring at a wall. Just for an alternative look as well, on Favela, I booted it up here. This is what it looks like with minimal, this is what it looks like with optimal. And swapping back and forth, I honestly can't tell any difference here whatsoever between minimal and optimized. So if you are somebody that's still concerned about the bandwidth that texture streaming uses and the potential for that to maybe cause some in-game lag, even though I didn't really find any evidence of that being the case, it appears if you turn this setting to minimal, it's not only not really going to be using any bandwidth at all, the game itself is also going to look essentially just as good unless you're staring at a wall, and even then, sometimes you can't really detect much of a difference, if any. And with all of that testing out of the way, I just wanted to share some of my thoughts on this change to texture streaming. The first thing I wanted to say here is something I've already expressed in the past. I think, ideally, the player should have the option to download high-resolution texture packs and have them permanently installed on their system, so then we don't need to use texture streaming at all.
I agree with that too.
The highest resolution textures possible, because those textures will be stored locally alongside the game. Yes, this will result in a bigger file size overall taken up by the game, but for many of us,
yes,
we're totally
I agree
fine
with that too.
I've got tons of extra storage space, and
But
I'd be happy
the thing
to have
is,
them downloaded and
this
installed at all
is
points,
not
so then I would never have to
for
experience any of that pop.
this is not for PlayStation 5 owners or the PC players. No. This is for the PS4 players. And y'all need to get off of PS4, because this is gonna get worse. This system right here, the exclusive Ace is talking about here, this is gonna get worse as the years that go by. Show you what. This is PS4, Modern Warfare 3 on PS4, and this is in beta. Texture streaming has been around since Modern Warfare 2. Okay? So, I'm going to show you how this is going to go. You're going to understand why you should get off PS4. Okay? Let me show you. I don't know if you can see that. See? It's popping in. Look. Let me go right back and show you how that looks. Hold on here, 1 second here. Look at that.
Secure the hard point. Hard point.
See? Nothing.
Target area.
And it pops in.
Hard point compromised. We've secured the lead.
So, that's what you have, PlayStation 4 players. That's what you have. This is not going to change. In the next few years, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. PlayStation 5 can handle this and can do this faster because we're dealing with SSD, not a archaic hard drive. They read slower, and SSD reads faster. So all this goes away. Okay? So if you think you're gonna buy Black Ops 6 and not see this, I have a bridge to sell ya. I have an entire bridge to sell ya. So get off PS4 to avoid this. This is telling me that we need to go to the next generation. Upgrade. It's time to upgrade. This is not the time to rest on your laurels. No, 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 no. Time to go up. Time to go up. I know it's expensive, but you guys gotta do it. You want the best games, or do you want to stay on a console that can't handle it? This tells me it can't handle it anymore.
Hardpoint compromised. Secure the area. Enemies inside the perimeter. Hardpoint
Hold on 1 second here. Let me pause. Alright, so let's go.
Pop-in that occurs when you're using texture streaming. And then I would also know that I've got the highest resolution textures always on at all times, even though I didn't really notice that much of a difference anyway. Having this choice of installing that high resolution texture pack would be the best of both worlds. For people that want to save space, they can use texture streaming. For people that have the space and don't want to use any extra bandwidth and don't want to deal with pop-in, we can install that high resolution texture pack. That's the type of solution that should make everybody in the community happy with this. And this leads me to the last topic I wanted to talk about here, and this is one of the big concerns that people have with Black Ops 6, and that is the fact that they're now forcing texture stream on us even for campaign, which means we won't be able to play the campaign in Black Ops 6 unless we have an active internet connection at all times. Based on Activision's statement, you literally can't play the campaign of Black Ops 6 unless...
That idea is not just a Activision thing, it's a Microsoft thing.
Environments outside of texture streaming.
Yeah, you heard it from me.
That offline without any internet connection whatsoever, even if we're required to download that extra texture pack beforehand and install that, and then we can go offline and play that. Again, it's all about player choice here. I do think texture streaming does have some great benefits attached to it. I think for many people, it's an excellent solution. One of the big issues with Call of Duty in recent years, and one of the big complaints, has been the massive file sizes. And this is their way of solving that issue, which is
and
great.
This is that what he just said. It's for PS4 players. We did have like 100 gigabytes for like Modern Warfare. It went up to 200. So he's right.
And this is where I'm curious to hear from you guys in those comments down below. How are you feeling about this whole situation with the updated texture streaming in Call of Duty? Are you guys happy to see these smaller file sizes? Are you somebody that would download a high-resolution texture pack if it were offered so you didn't have to use texture streaming, but then, of course, you would have a larger file size? Were you guys surprised to see that the minimal setting is effectively just off? Just let me know all of those thoughts down below. If you enjoyed this one, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.
So, yeah. Y'all need to get off PS4. Y'all need to start buying PS5 and get the best experience. Come on. It's time. Let's go. Let's go. That's all for this video. Please like the video. Subscribe to the channel. Share the video. And all that jazz. Stay awesome. I'll see you guys later.